Hello and welcome back. So from this lecture, we are going to understand NgRx entity with practical examples. And in this lecture, we are going to create an entity state for courses. So let's go to our application. And here, let's go to sources folder. Let's go to app folder. In there, we have courses folder. And there, let's go to the state folder. And here, let's open courses state. So currently, you will see that here we have an initial state, which is of type courses state. In the courses state, we are defining two properties, courses, which is going to be an array of course objects, and we have this showForm property, which is going to store a Boolean value. So in the courses state, these are the two states which we are maintaining. And if we go to our application, and here, if I open Redux dev tool, you can see all the states of our application here. And here, if I expand this courses state, there you will see that we have two properties, two state properties, courses, which is storing an array. And in that array, we have some course objects. And we have this show form property, which is currently set to false. Right, when I click on this create course button, then this show form property has changed to true. So it has opened this form. And again, if I close this, show form is set to false. So currently, we are not going to worry about this show form property, but if you see this courses state, currently it is storing an array. Now what we are going to do is, instead of storing this courses as an array, we are going to store it as a dictionary. So we are going to create an entity for this courses. For that, what we can do is, for now, let me comment this courses array. And here what we can do is, we can create an IDs property, which is going to store the IDs of all the courses. And we are going to create an entities property, which is going to store an object. And in that object, we are going to have a key value pair. Now, what will be the key? The key is going to be a string value. In our case, we want to use the ID of the course as the key. So the ID of each course is a string value. That's why here I am saying that the key is going to be a string value, because we want to use the course ID as key, and course ID is a string value. If I open the models here, if I open the course model, there you will see that this ID is a string value. So we want to use this ID as key. So that will be the key, and its type is string. And for that key, the value will be a course object. So here I can say that the value is going to be a course. And here this IDs is going to be an array of string values. Right. And now here we can specify the IDs property. Initially it will be empty array, and we can specify the entities property. Initially it is going to be an empty object, or maybe I can also set it to null. Right. So we can do it in this way. And now whenever a new course will be added, what we will have to do is, first we will have to add the ID of that course in this IDs array, and then we will have to update this entities, and there we will have to create a key value pair where we will use the ID of the course as the key and the course object as the value. So we will have to do this manually if we want to store the courses as an entity instead of storing it as an array. Or what we can do is, we can use NgRx entity in our application. For that, let's go to the documentation of NgRx, and there let me expand this state. And now we are going to talk about this NgRx entity. So if I expand this, let's go to the overview. So here you can learn what we use NgRx entity for. As I have already mentioned before, we use NgRx entity to simplify the CRUD operation on an entity. And it also reduces the boilerplate code in the reducer functions by providing some built-in methods on the entity adapter. So that's what you will learn here. But here I'm not going to go into the theory of NgRx entity again, because we have already learned about it in our previous lecture. So let's go to this installation page, and from there I'm going to copy this ng-add ngrx/entity, or we can also use npm install ngrx entity. but here I'm going to use this command. So I'm going to copy this. Let's go to VS Code, and there I'm going to open VS Code built-in terminal. And in here, let me go ahead and let me clear the terminal, and let's type that. So here I want to add NgRx entity in my NgRx application. And from here, I will remove this latest. I want to install NgRx entity version 16. And if I press enter, it should install NgRx entity for our application. So it has started installing it. Let's wait for it to complete. All right. So the NgRx entity package has been installed here. Let me close the terminal. And now we don't have to write these two lines manually. What we can do is we can simply extend this course state interface to inherit entity state. Okay, and to use this entity state, we need to import it from NgRx entity. And here we also need to specify the type. So this entity state is going to be of type course. All right. And with this, now we don't need to write these two lines. We can simply omit it. Now here we want to keep an extra property which is not related to courses, and that is this showForm state. So for this courses state, behind the scenes an entity will be created, a dictionary will be created. Basically the IDs array and the entities property will be created for this courses behind the scenes. But apart from that, we also want to have an extra state in this course state so that we can specify inside this interface like I'm doing here. All right. And here also, we don't need to initialize it like this. Instead, we need to initialize it in a different way. How? Let me show you that. So for that, once we have extended our course state to inherit from entity state, after that, we are going to create an adapter, or maybe I can create that adapter before that. So here, first we are going to create and export an adapter. I'm going to call it as courseAdapter. You can name it anything. But to create this adapter, we are going to use another function called createEntityAdapter. And to use it, again, we need to import it from NgRx entity. And here, when we are creating this adapter, we also need to pass the type. Then only it will know what type of adapter it has to create. So on which entity it has to create an adapter. So in this way, we have created an adapter. Now, as we learned in the last lecture, this adapter is going to provide us some built-in methods to perform CRUD operation from the reducer functions. It is also going to provide us some built-in selectors, and it is also going to provide us a method using which we can create the initial state. Here, if you see, we have an error, and this error we have because it says that this initial state, since it is of type course state, we also need to specify the IDs and entities property for this state. But in this course state, we have not specified IDs and entities property. That we are inheriting from the entity state. So we also need to implement those two properties. But I don't want to implement it manually. Instead, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create an initial state. For that, I can remove this from here, and here I can say initial state equals courseAdapter dot get initial state. Okay, and this is going to give us the initial state for this courses entity. Now remember that this courses state, apart from having the course entity, it also has this showForm property, which is an extra property. This showForm property is not present in the course entity, in the course interface. So this is an extra property which we are handling along with course entity. So for this also we need to specify an initial value, and that we can do by passing an object here, and inside that we can say this showForm, initially it should be false. And in this way we have created an initial state. And here also let me specify the type of this initial state as course state. So with this, we have created an entity state for courses. We have created an adapter, and we have also specified an initial state for the course entity as well as the extra state properties which we have for the course. Now, if I save the changes and if I go to the terminal, there you will see that we have lot of errors. Now, why do we have these errors? So for example, if I take this example here, you see on the courses, we are trying to use this find method, but this find is an array method and we are using this find on this courses, but this courses is no more an array. In the same way, if you see from here, we are trying to return state.courses from within this courses selector. And it says that this courses does not exist on type course state. And that is correct. In this course state, we do not have any courses state anymore. Instead, we have this showForm state property. We will have the IDs array state property, and we will have an entities property. We do not have any courses property. And that's why we have this error. This courses does not exist on the state, on the courses state. Then here we have the error because we are trying to use this filter method on the courses, and again this filter is an array method. And first of all, this courses does not exist on this state, that's why we have the error. And same is the reason here, this courses does not exist on this state, that's why we have the error. Instead, we have the IDs property, we have the entities property, and we will have the show form property in this state. This courses does not exist on this state, so that's why we have all these errors. So in the next lecture, what we will do is, first we will try to fix the issues in the reducer, and after that we will try to fix the issues which we have in the selector. This is all from this lecture. If you have any questions from this lecture, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.